Well, I hope I can entertain you a little bit with a couple of more of how to construct some of these rings. What I did for these are called, I call them half shanks, and they go together like a clamshell. And so I've done one that's a faceted citrine, and it's a very pretty ring, and this is the die it came from. And I did another with a faceted ruby, and this is the die that came from. And I'm sure you can't see it very well on the video, but of course I will have composed pictures that I'll also put in here. So I put together some YouTube or some video shots, hopefully to make a short YouTube. I'm sure that I did not capture all of the steps, but hopefully a significant number of them that might give you some hints in your own work. These are actually really fun. They're a little fiddly, but they're really they make beautiful rings. I'll say that much. And these are very much like the style of classical engagement rings from the Art Deco period. They're really gorgeous. And being die struck, they're also extremely dense and tough. So they are hopefully bound to survive. Enjoy. Well, for these two half shanks, I'm going to start with just pieces of annealed sterling silver, 18 gauge, and I've cut pieces 1 inch by about 1.25 inches to cover the entire design. And the first step will be to use urethane and do an initial pressing to get an outline, what I call a ghost, that I can use to trim the sides. I decided to do both of these, as I mentioned, because this one looks like a really versatile split shank that I'll make a collet for to fit in there. And then this one looks like it might be pierceable and a little bit of a filigree design with ultimately 4 prongs once I form that seat. So this could be kind of cool. These are interesting designs. Yep, so that looks like it does a fairly good job of making a ghost. I'll have to back off of that a little bit, sorry. A ghost impression. So that'll be cutting, trimming it to fit. Okay, second pressings are going to be with the annealed trimmed blanks and no urethane. So we'll just be pressing directly down on top of that. It'll need at least 3 pressings, sometimes even 4. After this pressing, I will trim it very close and see how it goes then. Yeah, so It's almost there, but of course it will take a little bit more. But that's okay. Yeah, this is not too shabby. Let me show you. Let's see if I can get a better version of this or a better view of this. Right, so that's after 2 pressings. So I will be trimming these closer, and I think a 3rd pressing might be all it needs. Alrighty, so as a reminder, right now we've pressed twice and I've trimmed twice. Now I've trimmed it reasonably closely between the prongs on the one with the prongs. You can see that. And I've also done this split shank this way. I'm leaving the 2 sides connected until I get them soldered together as halves. And the reason for that is I want to have these rings in perfect register. And if I cut this too early, I'm afraid that I'll goof that up, that I'll be stretching it somehow. So anyway, I'm going to leave that connected. It just makes it a little more pressure to get the detail here, but I don't think that's going to be a problem. So I've annealed these, and I'm going to go for the 3rd pressing, and I predict that the 3rd pressing is all that's going to be required. So let's just set this one up first. Now, again, a little bit of 3-in-1 oil, just for grins. Put that in register nicely, center the work, and here we go. Turn 180. Turn 90. Turn 180. And let's see if I can pop it out of there. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Oh yeah. So that picked up all the detail. So I think 3 is going to be fine for this. So what I'll do next is I'll press all 4 sides of the 2 rings, and then I'm going to trim them. And this one version with the prongs, I'm going to go ahead and pierce that design before I assemble the 2 halves. This is going to make a very interesting ring. And the other one I will assemble and then see what size collet it will accept, and build a collet to accept a faceted stone for it. Cool designs. Yeah, these half shanks are not that bad to do. This ring looks like it will accept a 5mm setting or collet, so I'll wait and see after I get it together. I'll start by making a collet to see if I can get that to work, and if not, I can always put a setting in there. That would really look nice as well. These, I'm going to pierce the gallery here just because I can, and I think that'd be pretty nice. So we'll try that. So the first thing I have to do, though, of course, is drill a bunch of holes. So I do that just with my Fordham, and this one is a 0.5mm bit. Just touch and release, touch and release. Go to the beeswax. You always tell when it's cutting. You get those curls and everything off. Yeah, that's that one. Let's see. I believe that's what's over here. And over here. And here. Okay, so there's half. I will do the other half of this one, and then the other half of ring, and then we'll pierce this before we worry about assembly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is pierce through this design. And I won't bore you with all this. I just put a little bit on the video so you know the sequence. I have to make sure I can see. Yeah, there we go. And again, I'm repeating myself, but I use the saw blade almost like a little file. Now let the weight of the saw is what's pulling it through the metal. I'm really not exerting downward force. I'm pushing a little bit. But when it's cutting, when it's moving down, I'm very close to just allowing the weight of the saw to do the job. That seems to work really well. I get that little bit there. Good job. Okay. Okay, so through the magic of video editing, I've now finished cutting those two sides. So the next step is just a quick cleanup of these areas using a fine tip flame burr. Okay, so those are pretty good. Next step on these is to run a scratchy pad, high-speed scratch pad over the back to take off those burrs and clean up the cuts. Alrighty, time to attempt some assembly. For this first one, the split shank is going to go together really very simply, I think. Just smack the two sides together like a pair of plates or a pair of clamshells. And I will start by putting solder on the back part of the shank. Notice I've clamped it fairly tightly on that part that's going to be waste. I'm going to be cutting that middle part away anyway. And I'm using that to hold the piece and to keep it stable. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and melt some hard solder into that. Then I'll turn it over and add a few bits of solder to the top to make sure that these prongs are nicely set. So let's see if I can do this. This vice grips will be quite a heat sink, so I might need a little more heat than I like, but we'll see. Okay, I got the back half soldered together. As I expected, the vice grips provided quite a heat sink, and it took a bit of doing. But it got together fine. So now what I've done is turn around, add a couple balls of solder at the top just to make sure that I have flooded this area that's pretty tight fitting anyway, but I want to make sure that that's well fixed. Okay. Now, the interesting thing about this kind of half shank with prongs is that there are a variety of ways that they can be assembled. There's no one right way as far as I can tell. The objective is going to be to have this gallery portion with the prongs open, see? So what you need to do is before you solder the shank, we have to at least begin to put a curvature into the gallery so that when we press them together, these portions are not stuck. Otherwise, you'd have to saw through it, and that kind of doesn't make any sense. So there's a bunch of ways to do this. I've shown them on T-shanks a couple times where you can basically hold this on the press over on a piece of urethane, put a tube on it or a round bar and press down, and that'll give you a bend there. You can also use a swage block and just hammer a little dent in there. There are a couple of ways. There's no simple or easy, just always work way. There's just a way I'm going to try and do it now. So what I'm going to start with is I'm going to try and hold the shank more or less flat. It's going to deform no matter what you do. But, and I have to reform it. Then I'm going to take a pair of pliers like this. Now, I bought these for this kind of operation, but before I had them, all I did was take a piece of Delrin and cut a shape in it, cut a V in it, and I could use that like a swage block, right? So you don't need fancy pliers. You could just use a piece of urethane or a piece of plastic like this and make a shape. Now, what I'm going to do is try to gently, since this is pierced, I'm just going to try and gently put a bit of a curvature right there, like that. Okay, that actually turned out pretty well. Now, it's going to still require more shaping after we're done, as you'll see. But that makes it pretty straightforward. So let's clamp this one. We'll try this side again. One of the tricks is always getting them symmetrical. They won't be. There's just no way to do that. But after the fact, we'll try and make them pretty symmetrical. Okay. So let's see what our result was just by doing that. Okay, so just by doing that, we now have a ring that would look something like this. And you begin to get the sense that you understand how this thing is going to go together. So I haven't decided yet. I will probably bring these sides closer together and solder them. You could do this with 6 prongs. I think it was probably intended for 4. So, to bring these 2 sides together and solder them. But what I'm going to do is, I'm just putting this together for the first time. So what I'm going to do is simply solder together these shanks so that I have something to work with. And that'll give me a lot more freedom to begin to shape this part and see what I think I can do with that. Okay, so the first step is to align these carefully, hold them in a clamp, and put some solder on this shank to begin forming a ring. But hopefully you can see now that even You could cut these prongs off and put a bezel on there, a decorative bezel or a tube bezel or a claw setting, or you could put a little ring in there and make a seat for a cabochon. There's lots of ways to go forward with these designs. That's what makes them so fantastic. Because you can make, probably 13, 14, 20 different kinds of ring with the same exact die set. We're not limited to that in that way. Okay, I mean, I'm sure there was a set intention, but that's not what we're doing. So hopefully that makes sense. So next step, solder. Well, as I hope you can tell, half the battle, or at least a portion of it, is just getting clever in ways of holding your work and positioning things. You could use that hold it clay, you could use a clamp. I decided I'm going to just try and initially get the back shank soldered so that I can manipulate the rest of it more easily. And for that I'm just holding it in these titanium tweezer things. Okay, I like the way it went in one side, and I hate the way it went in this off side.
Make sure that I put a couple more balls of solder in there. And sometimes it can be helpful just to make sure it's flux. Okay, so we're going to put a couple more balls of solder there and make sure that side is done correctly. I can't see it with the camera, I don't think, but it's just the same as it was on the other side. I don't like the way the solder flowed. I think too much of it did not suck into the joint, which was not a good call.
But I'm going to cool it off and inspect it before we go any further. Whatever you do, I just need to make sure that that shank is well fixed. Are going to be, and how that's going to play out. So let's see if we can get some solder into this part, and then the bulk of the shank will be stabilized. Okay, let's see. Yeah, I don't think that's too bad. That's about what I wanted to have happen. So, what I'll be doing is pickling this, and that will let me see things a little better. Start to maybe use a grinder to, a burr to start polishing this up or shaping it, and then we'll work on shaping this setting for a final fitting, and make a decision about what kind of stone, what shape, if I'm going to use a faceted or a cabochon. I often, when I'm doing these for the first time, simply try and make it in such a way that I think it was intended by the original designer, at least in the same ballpark. And then I modify things. I just do whatever seems to fit artistically. Okay, so into the pickle this goes. Okay, so actually whilst that one half is in the pickle, I'm going to go ahead and do some filing on this. This is that split shank, and this is not going to be final by any stretch, but I like to get things at least into a reasonably accomplished shape so I can check for any gaps and see what I'm up against. So we'll just shape it a little bit, get rid of some of the rough edges. Knowing this is going to be a final anything. This is using number 4 file. I should use number 2 just to get rid of some of this excess junk. But that's okay. 4 does a great job of finishing. And there's so much to do following that. Okay, a little bit more on the inside.
And oddly enough, you should be aware of these shanks. Even though the regulation says they should be identical because you're pressing two of the same thing,
they are mirror images, right? So even though they're identical pieces, when you put them together, you're putting together mirror images. And so as symmetrical as the designs are, they're not perfect. And so you will almost always have one side that doesn't fit entirely perfectly compared to the other. Don't worry about it. Just get it really close and file away the excess. It isn't that you made a big mistake. It's just that the design had some latitude for imperfection. And that's okay. Okay, so now we're going to try and get rid of some of this goop here so I can make sure that I've got a nice joint. Yeah, it's not too bad. I might have one little blip there that I'm going to fix. We'll see. We'll see if that goes through or if that is just a superficial divot. Yeah, I might do this a little bit more. We're just going to shake this because it's really not pretty. I'm doing this again before I cut that waist away because I think that'll stabilize the entire structure. One prong's got shorter than the other. And so then, or prongs that is, like the shoulders. Make a snap over to file the high one down. Easy bit. So what I'll do is put this aside for a moment and go check on the other ring that's in the pickle. Okay, this is pretty nice and interesting. I think it's looking to me like it might have been intended for about a 5mm faceted stone, maybe a 4 or 5 or 6, I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark. You could leave it like this, it wouldn't be unattractive. But I'm going to try and shape it just a little more so I can get a better sense of what I might like to do for a final push. Let me see if I can bring these together a little bit carefully. Close them. What I had originally thought was that these side prongs here might join and make one double prong, and I still may kind of do that. As long as these stay separated so that they don't get soldered together, then as long as I have a little gap there, I can use a nail set or something and round that out after the fact. So I think I'm going to do that. I'm going to try and shape these and run some solder. It may not go all the way to the tip here, but that's okay because I would be filing down a notch to make that a double prong. And I'll pick it up some other time, and we'll do a complete video on this. So again, next steps on this one are going to be to cut this waist part out and decide if I'm going to make a collet. And I'll probably try to make a collet first and see if I like it or not. That's one option. And then on this one, we'll run solder up these two sides, and then we'll use a nail set or a mandrel or something, and we'll open this up and make it round and make a decision about how we want to set a stone in that. That's a very attractive ring setting, though. When you pierce that really looks sharp, I think. Okay, again. Well, it's time for me to cut out this bit that I've been keeping as a brace. So I'm just going to saw around this little scroll work. Little attractive scroll. Whoops. Okay. That just slipped right out. It's got a little bit of a wobble on it because it's so long there. Okay. And I'm going to do this. Shoot. Well, I think the plan for this beauty is a 6mm citrine. I found one in my stash. So what I did was I used a nail set, a round nail set, to round that opening just a little bit more. It's still a little oval, but that's okay. And then I used a file to shape the prongs a little bit, and a round burr to just put a bit of a bevel on that. Now I still would like to, I think I'm going to be cutting seats right around that girdle so I can push these prongs over nicely. But I think that's the way that ring is going to be. And that, boy, oxidized, that will be really sharp. Anyway, I'll show you the finished product when I'm done with this one. It's just a lot of handwork at that point. But building the ring is kind of fun, and it gets you most of the way there with the dies. So that's really, really nice. And this beauty, I haven't decided yet how I'm going to finish it. I did build a collet. I made it out of fine silver. It started as 20 gauge, and by the time you beat it into shape, it's quite a bit heavier than that. And I really kind of like these cute little ears that stick up, but they add a dimension that is a little unique. It could be a round stone, it could be a faceted, it could be a cabochon put in there and held with these ears and a little bit of fold over. I could cut this or carve it into a small oval. There's a lot of possibilities. I just have not decided yet what I'm going to do. This is a 6mm, this is the 6mm citrine I'm going to put in the other ring. So clearly a 5 or a 6mm round would go in there. But so would any other number of stones. So I'm going to sit on this one overnight and make a decision and just decide how I'm going to finish this one off. But yeah, there's a lot of different treatments that you could do with this. As I mentioned before, one of the things I played with was you could build a bezel setting on there. In fact, you could probably even do something like that. That's not half bad. I may have to look into this. You know, I have a couple of other flower type bezels that sitting on top of that collet with a stone, with a pretty stone, boy, that might make an interesting treatment. I'm going to have to give this some thought. Okay, so I'll surprise you with the outcome. But this is where these things are just so fantastically neat. You can figure out a little bit about how the original designs were made, and then add your own creative additions as you go along. And it's a great way to hone your skills in just soldering and forming and sawing and fabricating. Love it. Anyway, that's where that one is right now. But I'm going to sit on this one for overnight. Okay, so what I decided to do with these rings is this. This one is very pretty. It's going to hold a 6mm round faceted stone, and I'll be setting that in just a few minutes. Shined up very nicely, both of them did. I was going to oxidize them. I think I'll just wait and see what I feel like after I get the stones in and see what they look like. And then this ring, what I did was I had put that collet in there, and I decided that I would use one of these fancy bezels. It fit in there quite nicely with just a little bit of carving. And then I have a tube setting, a short tube setting in there that will hold a 5mm faceted stone. And boy, that makes a very attractive ring as well. And I like the balance of that. I like to have the stone setting come up to the tops of those curls there, which are really, really quite attractive. Anyway, I'll set those stones and show you the final product.